Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. This is going to be a very, very special show, and I am so honored to have the author of the Grief and Happiness Handbook with me tonight. I have Emily Thiroux Threatt, and she's the author of the book Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. She founded the Grief and Happiness Alliance and hosts the Grief and Happiness podcast, designed to comfort and support those dealing with grief and loss, focusing on happiness. Her latest book is Grief and Happiness Handbook, the one we're going to be talking about tonight. She's the creator and photographer of the Grief and Happiness cards. Each of the 52 cards are designed to encourage you to find inner peace, love, and harmony. When you talk about grief, you talk about great sadness, and almost everyone has had that experience. I think one of the most important things about grief is that most people have experienced it and they don't realize that it's a very personal, very intimate aspect of loving and living. And this book is probably the best book I have ever read on the topic. And all of you know how many books I read. So that's saying something very, very special. So I want to welcome Emily to the show. Welcome, Emily. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I think the thing that has impressed me so greatly after reading your book a couple of times, actually, the one point that you bring across so well, so often, is that grief, trauma and grief, is something that everybody experiences differently and personally. So, I can't say to somebody, oh, you lost your pet cockatiel. I know what that's like, because I don't. And we all process through our own level of consciousness and understanding. And because that's so very different, it's not the kind of thing you can say, I know how you feel. It's something you could say, I've had that experience. I can't imagine what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And you did pull me back too, because so often, we'll say, I'm so sorry for your loss, but my sorry for your loss and your sorry for your loss are two different things. So your book reminded me of that, and I have to say to everybody and to you that reading your book was a joyful experience. It was not sad, and it wasn't something that sent me to tears. As a matter of fact, I found myself giggling in many places, and that's not to diminish the intensity of grief. It's a reminder that you can be grieving and joyful at the same time.
Oh, that was the whole. Excuse me. Sorry. The whole point of the book was for people to be able to realize that, because, as you said, generally when people see the word grief, they think it's sad, and I know when I first started reading books on grief, I had 2 husbands die, and I didn't read so much grief books after the first one died because I didn't it just didn't cross my mind to do that. But after the second one died, I'd had a whole lot of experience, and I thought, I want to see what other people have to say. And so I started reading books and kept finding more and more books, and they made me so sad. I
Yeah.
thought, I don't want to read this, I want to find something that can show me that there's hope, that I'm not going to be in this place I am right now, which is perfectly normal in early grief, of either feeling kind of empty or lost or devastated and sad, but that you can move forward and things can get so much better, and you can lead a very wonderful life and still be grieving for the people that you love, that are no longer physically there with you. I've had lots of people die. My parents, 2 husbands, most of my relatives. I think there's only 2 of us left in my generation. And friends, patients, lots of people. And I I have lots of experience with that. Each experience was different. And if I was stuck in each one of those situations, I would be devastated for life. But instead, I know that I'm going to grieve for each one of those people for the rest of my life because they were important to me and they were a significant part of my life, and I'll hold them in my heart forever.
Well, I think that's
It would be happy for me to be crying forever.
no, that's I think one of the really important things. I know when my mother died, my sister and her husband, and there were a lot of us that got together and we went out to dinner and we put my mother's cocktail in the center of the table, and my son said, "Okay, everybody's got to take a sip and tell something funny that happened with Grandma."
Oh,
And
I love
and
that.
after the second round, I said, "Wait a minute, we have to stop this. I lived with her for the last 30 years. I have more stories than all of you, and I can't drink any more of this because it's disgusting. I'll tell the funny stories, but I am not going to drink that drink. We'll just leave it on the table for her." Um, but it was, you can laugh, you can have laughter, and that laughter does help to dissipate it. But the long term grieving that you do that comes upon you in waves and strange and wonderful times, that's something that takes time. And I think the one thing that came across so strongly in your book was everybody does it in their own time, in their own way. No two are the same. Even, okay, I've had somebody die. Oh, here's someone else. Well, the grief is going to be in a different way. It's not going to be the same way. And your book, which I found very unique, after each segment of your book, there was a worksheet that you could work on, you could journal, you could talk about how that particular chapter applied to what you were going through. And it makes it so exciting to go through. Um, Even though nobody's died lately, knock on wood, um, I have a daughter who's a granddaughter who's at school in California in the middle of all the fires, and it was like, uh-oh, but
Yeah.
she's safe, thankfully. But it's sort of like all of your different exercises not only apply to grief, they apply to that stuck feeling we get into sometimes. They apply to writer's block, among other things. So your book is a wonderful handbook for shifting and changing your life and moving on, not forgetting anything, not forgetting anyone, not you know closing off an experience because if you're grieving, there was love of some sort connected to it, and you want to make sure you honor that love. and let the love take over. So you are an expert in grieving. And what was it that prompted you to do this book, aside from being an expert in the field?
Well, I didn't plan on becoming an expert in the field. It was something that just kind of occurred through life circumstances. But we moved to Maui 2 years before my husband died. And when we were in California, we had this family friends that lived just a couple blocks away that we did lots of things with, and we were very, very close. Had really good special experiences with them, and they were a lot younger than we were. And the man in the relationship, Chappie, was so close to my husband Ron, and Chap it called my husband Dad. There was that big of an age difference. And a few months after Ron transitioned, Chap died on his way home from work one day. He was in his car, and he apparently felt something happening and was able to pull over to the side of the road and died in his car. He wasn't sick. There was nothing wrong at all, and no anticipation that anything was going to happen at all. And that happened. And I was so concerned for his wife. And I was trying to figure out what I could do for her to help, because had I been there, she lived a couple blocks away. I would have been able to do actively lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, what can I do? And I'm a writer. I taught writing at the university level for my whole career and wrote college textbooks and that sort of thing. So I thought, writing, that's what I can do. I will write her every week for a year, because generally people are really good until after the celebration's over, and then they all kind of disappear.
Yeah.
And with her being so unprepared for this situation, I wanted to support her throughout that year. So I decided I would write her 52 different cards through that year to help her out. And when I decided that, I thought, I better make sure I can think of 52 different things before I start this big project.
Yeah.
So I sat down and I wrote out a list, and I got to 52 and kept going. So I had choices of different things. And the more I wrote, the more excited about writing these cards came to me. And I looked at this list, and I thought, as a writer, I saw an outline for a book.
Yeah.
And so that's where the book came from, or those subjects for all those cards. And actually, instead of one book having 52 chapters, it turned into 2 books with 26 chapters.
That'll do it.
My publisher said, this 52 chapter book is way too long. We've got to cut it. And I thought, I don't want any of it cut. So we decided to just separate it into 2 halves. So that's why I have 2 books, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief and the Grief and Happiness Handbook. Mm-hmm. And the cards are now published too.
Well, you certainly got your money's worth of the experience. I think that what I was so impressed with was the worksheet you did after each chapter that gave someone the experience of sitting and actually writing for themselves. One of the things that I push constantly everyone to do is journal. Mm-hmm. It got to the place where at Christmas time, people would get a package from me and said, "Oh, this is the journal for this year."
It's a good list.
Yeah. But it's writing is in many ways, on a spiritual level, a way to listen to the spirit within you, and it's a way to talk to yourself and help yourself to move through experiences. And yes, at some points in time, if you're not a writer, you get gobbledygook and you get all sorts of things, but eventually what you get is amazing, beautiful, wonderful advice from the spirit that rests within. And if you take the time to let that connection be made, it helps you through just everything. And I know that I have found that on top of time and being kind to yourself, there's the element of laughter that comes in here, and without laughter you don't heal.
Mhm.
So you have to find a way to let the laughter into your life one way or another. Even if it's complaining that you're writing and you don't know what you're writing about and it's a stupid experience, and suddenly there's a sentence or two that make a great deal of sense. So that you don't have to be an author and you don't have to publish your journals, though you were lucky you could. Um, it's a process that I mean, you said you have been journaling for all of your life. So what do you tell somebody that hasn't been journaling for all their life? How do they begin?
They start. They
Yeah.
start. Like, I have found I journal every single day. It's the first thing I do before I get out of bed. I've got it all set up so that I can sit up and write every day. And I learn so much from that. And I'm so grateful for all I learned from that. But I found with grief in particular, well, in life in general, let's start there, that we all have a story, and we can frequently let that story just kind of bounce around in our head. And when you do that, it keeps changing, and you forget things that you don't remember. You go, oh, I wish I would have written that down
Yeah.
so that you could remember. And so often we lose a lot that way. And with dealing with grief, one of the things that I have found people really, really need to do is tell their story. And that's a really good way to start journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And when my first husband, who died, uh, well, when he first got sick, actually, it was a shock to us. We didn't know that he had a health problem, and it turned out that he needed bypass surgery, where they actually did 7 bypasses. I didn't know there
Oh,
were 7
wow.
things you could bypass, but they found him. He was so close to death with how his heart was clogged up, and the adventure of what it took to discover that something was happening, and how everything kind of became an emergency. And that first week between when I first discovered his blood pressure was sky high to the week and a half later when he was getting out of the hospital, that was a long story. And we knew so many people at that time that they all wanted to know what happened, because they always saw him as a very happy, jovial guy, and had no idea that he was sick. And we didn't call it sick. It was his heart was clogged up.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to tell that story quickly, because there were each thing in it. If I told you that week and a half, that could make over a book in itself,
Oh,
because it's
my.
amazing the different things that happened, and the close calls, and the just unbelievable experience with a doctor, just incredibly unbelievable. So somebody had asked me, well, what happened? And I would tell them, and they'd start nodding off, because I was going on for so long,
Yeah.
this big, long story. Yet I found each time I told the story to the next person, it was shorter. And finally, I got to the point where I said, well, we found out that Jacques needed bypass surgery, and he had it, and he's doing so much better now, and we're so grateful we found it in time. And that wouldn't fill that whole book that I could have written for those few days. But the process of saying it over and over again helped me to get it out of my head, to get it expressed in a way that I could release it without fear of losing any of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because that's one of the reasons that we hang on to things so closely, is we're we're afraid. We don't want to repeat the experience. We don't want to miss something that we need in the future. But if you write your story and write everything, write every little detail, like when when the doctor told me that they had just done his angiogram and he came out and he said, I'm going to tell you something that you cannot tell your husband because your husband is high strung, which is, he was worried about what was going on with him. I wouldn't call that high strung. He says, your husband is high strung. And if you tell him what I'm going to tell you right now, it could kill him.
Oh, geez.
That was the kind of doctor I was dealing with. Fortunately, I was able to get out from underneath. But the whole experience of working with this one doctor and working our way through that and getting out and how we dealt with it. And it's a really interesting story. And I felt like I needed to tell that story beyond all the other details that went through that time period. But I found when I got to that point where I could say, we're so happy we found it in time and he's doing well now. And I could just say that. And people were really happy to hear that. And it was a relief, but it taught me the importance of getting that story out of my head. And the only way I could do that was by writing it down. And whenever I'd remember more of it or remember something else, I wrote that down too. It didn't have to necessarily be in chronological order. It could be in the order that I remembered it and what I wanted to remember through the process. And it was such a lesson to me, even though I had journaled for a long time. It was a lesson to me in the importance of journaling and not leaving things out that you want to remember so that you can live your best life without having your stories get in the way.
Yeah, I think when something traumatic like that happens, it's almost like we're a record and yet our needle is stuck and it keeps going back and going back and going back. And it's sort of like I know with both my mother and my late husband who passed away, and actually my father too. Come to think of it, a lot of people have passed away. It's different each time, and I think so many people, will say to you, "Well, you've been through this a lot before, so you should be able to handle this well." But no, that's not the same. It's a completely different situation, and so I'm ready for someone else now because I'll know that it's completely different. But that didn't occur to me until I read your book. The fact that the experience is so different. You're always in new territory, no matter what it is that's going on. That grief is deciding to billow up at you, and it's a matter of, okay, how do I deal with this? And somebody that I was counseling, called and she said, my husband just died. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I said, well, you did bury him. And she said, yes. I said, well, that's a good start. And she said, but now what do I do? I have all of this unhappiness. I have all of this sadness. And, I said to her, it's different for everybody. So don't let anybody tell you, after 6 months you should be, or after 9 months you should be. I said, you're literally writing your own book, and everything is okay. So at some point you're going to say, I want to kind of get my life back. And at that point, then you start to work on things that can take you out of that rut that you've carved for yourself because you're uncertain as to what's appropriate. And I think the fact that laughter can come in here at any time, and laughter is so healing, and often you laugh until you cry. So it serves two purposes.
Absolutely.
I mean, I have to thank you for sending me back to Bohemian Rhapsody, by the way. I had seen the movie, but and enjoyed the movie. It was a great movie, but I enjoyed it so much more the second time because I understood what was going on. And I know when my late husband was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, he said, "What do I do now?" And all I could say to him was, Whatever you choose, I support you, and I'm there with you. Whatever you choose is right for you." And that's how we handled it. And there was laughter throughout that whole process. It was really it was a healing. The process of his passing was a healing process for both of us on many different levels. So, it's how you face it, how you deal with it, and then how you get on with your life, because you're here to live your life. And um, I think the fact that all of the different things that you go into, like giving yourself permission to do what you want to do, as opposed to what other people tell you should be doing. Um, Somebody said to me, "Are you going to wear black?" And I said, I don't look good in black. No. But everybody has a thought on how a grieving person should act, and and not only are they all wrong for other people, but they may even be wrong for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be. And we're all individuals, and things are different for each one of us, and we should celebrate that instead of trying to put everybody in the same mold. I know when Jacques died, we were very active in theater. We actually had owned a live theater and School of Arts, and we'd done theater for a long time. And he hadn't done theater for a long time before he met me, even though he'd done it all through college and absolutely loved it. And he was a fabulous singer and loved to sing, but he hadn't done it for years because he wasn't in a position where it was around him all the time like it had been before. And I was very involved in theater when we got to know each other, so we started doing things together. So he had made lots of friends in the theater community, even though he was a philosophy professor at the college. At opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Although that took some performing too. He was passionate about theater. And when the one thing that I hadn't thought of, even though we had known for 2 years that his time was limited and we didn't know when that was going to come to an end, we hadn't talked about a service, or a celebration or what we were going to do. And I was just kind of blank about that and thought, here, I'm a theater director. I should be able to put on a big show, and just it wasn't there for me. And one of his dear friends, who also was an actor and a singer, called and said, "Let me handle the celebration for you." I said, "Thank you," because I love this man. My husband loved him. We knew that whatever he did was going to be wonderful. And we lived in California, and he lived in Georgia at that time, and he orchestrated it all from Georgia and came out and put on a theater performance that was amazing, that had everybody who should have been involved. We did it at the theater that we had created. It was a 99-seat theater in a beautiful 100-year-old building that we had remodeled into that theater. And we had people, the lobby was jam-packed, the wings of the theater was jam-packed, out in front on the sidewalk was jam-packed. It was a huge, huge celebration. And what he did was took the premise of the play, Our Town, and he played the part of the stage manager and orchestrated the whole service or celebration from that perspective.
Oh, wow.
And we had people sing, we had people act, we had people share. It was amazing. And I wished it could have been recorded, because I was not in a position to actually experience it all. But it was quite amazing. And one of the best things was he used to have my husband had a live radio show in Los Angeles where he sang and somebody played the piano for him. It was a weekly show, and he just loved doing that show and did all the. He had like kind of a Frank Sinatra kind of voice.
Oh,
Beautiful voice. And we found he was a lot older than I am. I have to preface it with this. We found an old 78 record that they had made of one of the recordings at that radio show. And I was able to get it to one of the people at the university where I worked that did sound stuff for the university. And he was able to get one of the songs off that record that we played as people were entering the theater.
oh my.
My husband singing in his most beautiful voice to welcome them to his celebration of life. And had I been stuck in, okay, this is what we have to do a celebration because that's what everybody else does, we would have made that incredibly beautiful experience.
Yeah, it's amazing how a celebration of life can actually be very healing.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a celebration.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people do what they think is a celebration, which is a downer. And it's a tough time to be creative, but it's a good time to start being creative too. And I think that the element of looking for joy and looking for celebration, I mean, the word celebration is there, and it has to be a celebration of life. If you're going to share that kind of energy, doing it in a celebratory way is so important. And it's right for some people, it's not right for other people, and that's the other part. You have to do what feels right to you. And I think that's the most important thing. Somebody said to me something about a celebration for their husband, but she said, it doesn't feel right. And I said, well, then maybe there's a different way that you can honor his passing. It doesn't have to be a celebration like your friend did or somebody else did. You can make it uniquely yourself, because whatever is right for you is appropriate for them. And so I think your book gives everybody it gives them permission to be unique. And
that's perfect. I'm going to write that down and remember that, because that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's just and what I found so wonderfully enlightening about all of the different chapters and the different aspects of grief that you go into, helping people you help to remind people that they're individuals. And that's what I found so wonderful. Somebody dies and there are rituals that you go through because they've died. There's this, there's often there are different things people do. But the funeral actually is not for the person that's died. It's for the people that are left behind. And it's okay to be joyful. It's okay to have laughter. It's okay to actually start to celebrate your life, because it now is yours uniquely. And you have to discover who you are. And I know my sister lost her husband 4 years ago, and she's just now discovering who she is. And that's an important thing for people to understand. You're no longer a couple. You're a unique individual. And they were married for 42 years. So she's digging deep. But it's how do you do it? And you list so many different ways that people can start to remind themselves of who they are. Some of the chapters may not be appropriate for some people, but others will be absolutely wonderful. And of course, the one that hit me the most is laughter is the best medicine, because of course, to my mind, if you can laugh, you can heal. You know,
Mm.
you're on the way. If you can't find that laughter yet, it's not time. And let's go through some of the other steps and see what is more appropriate for you. Certainly the journaling, but journaling in a positive way as opposed to a mournful way. You know, I think there's a danger often in people when they are mourning that they get so locked into that loss aspect that they forget that there is a life that they're going to be leading, and they have to get to where they can start leading that life. And and the most important thing again is they do it in their own time, in their own way.
Well, that's right. And I really think that it's important for them to write down the mourning too. Because a lot of times people try to avoid that. They're
Hmm.
afraid that if they start expressing their grief, that it's going to be something that is going to get out of control, and that they won't be able to handle it, and so they pack it away. And so it's important not to have like an oh artificial happiness where they're trying to make themselves feel like they're
Yeah.
happy when they're really not. But if you take the time to express your grief and think about what that entails and what it is you're sad about, and then start looking at what you can be happy about, how you can grow and change. I know I tell people now that I'm happier now than I ever have been.
Hmm.
And they go, "You've had two husbands die. How can you, I've been married most of my life. How can you be by yourself and have your husbands die and you say you're happy?" And I say, "Yep, I am."
Well, you do discover joyful aspects of your own life.
Yeah.
I know I started at one point after my late husband died, um, making lists of things I learned from him.
That's good.
And I got to the point where it was like, I wonder if he knew how much I appreciated all of these things that I learned from him.
Yeah, that's really
Um,
important.
well, I also had a list of things that drove me crazy. Um,
Let's
and oh, geez, it was, and when I started to write those down, it was like, oh, how petty you are, Barbara. You but it's a wonderful way of self-analyzation that is really kind of exciting. I think one of the other things that touched me was you're describing the two different kinds of tears.
Yes. What touched you about that?
Well, the fact that some of the actually they're healing and cleansing, and you shouldn't be sorry that you're crying, because in a way it helps you to heal.
Absolutely. You have to get those tears out one way or another.
Hmm.
And when you allow yourself to do it, think about sometime when you cried really hard about something. When the tears stop, you can take a deep breath,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you can say, "Okay, now what?"
Well, I
You
think I think you're crying in the car bit. I would tell people often, now you're going to be fine, but you're also going to be hit by times of crying that you can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason there a trigger is hit, and you're sobbing, and that's okay. S-
Absolutely.
but I think those waves of crying are the things that surprised me the most. I would be driving along a road, I wouldn't be thinking of him or life or anything like that, and suddenly I would be just sobbing out of control. And after I got done, it was, well, that was interesting. And something somewhere crossed a timeline and triggered me, and that was all she wrote. And it's again something that is unique to every individual. That's what is the most important thing I think people have to get, that it's unique, it's very personal, and it's very intimate.
Yeah.
And there's no way of giving somebody a list of these are the stages. I mean, yes, there are stages of this and stages of that, but grieving, it's open territory.
Yeah. All over the place. You know that chapter, crying in the car. I've had more interesting comments on that than anything else in the book, I think, because people go, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was going crazy because I'd be in the car all by myself and all of a sudden the tears would come and they were shocked. And people
Yeah.
would be relieved to have read that chapter because they realized we all have that experience.
Well, and there had to be some leftover grief from somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's years later. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not, you can't put it in a well, within the first 6 months you'll experience this, and then you'll experience it doesn't work that way. And it's fascinating, the different the different aspects of things that you can work through. And I told somebody about your book, and I said, look, just pick the chapters that really relate to you, that you feel very comfortable with, and work through those chapters. And then you might want to go back and check some of the other one out, because you just can't say to somebody, "Oh, I've lost a husband too. I know exactly how you feel." No, you don't.
Nope.
And that to me, and it isn't just husbands we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I happen to be a cat and dog person, so when those children go, at one point, my mother was very sick for very long, so 30 years of taking care of her and stuff like that. And shortly thereafter, two of my animals passed away. Heavy duty illness. And I sobbed and I sobbed. And somebody said, you didn't sob this much when your mother died. And I said, you're right. That wonderful poem, The Rainbow Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sent me a card with the Rainbow Bridge poem in it. And I had a post office box, and I opened the card uh, at the post office, and the poem just hit me, and I was sobbing. And somebody said, well, what's wrong? And I told them that my pet had passed away, and I had everyone at the post office crying.
Oh.
They told me I couldn't open my mail there anymore. uh,
Wow.
but it's just it's different. After 30 years, I was so happy that she finally found peace that I was cried out.
Yeah.
There
You
was
know,
nothing
sure
left.
that I'm sure you cried over those 30 years different times. You probably had cried all you needed to.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And so happy that she finally was at peace. So
Yeah.
happy that with her it was a celebration. She finally finished what she needed to do here, and it was time for her to go. But it's kind of interesting, because some of your other aspects here are showing appreciation. Something that when you're going through a grieving process, you're not paying attention to, and it's easy to forget about the kindnesses that were done for you. And it's kind of going through the process sets you up for becoming a better person in
Mm-hmm.
many different ways. And so, losing a number of people gives you the opportunity to be an even better person, as you process through the whole thing. But I had such a lovely time with your book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, even down to the music part, where there are certain things that play on the radio that take me back to times of joy, that take me back to, and I remember them and keep playing them. And Bohemian Rhapsody is one of them. Thank you again for that one. Mamma Mia, I adore that show. I can't listen to that show without being celebratory and wanting to dance.
Mm-hmm.
And And you do talk about dancing here, and going through grief doesn't mean that you can't celebrate other aspects of life,
That's right.
and you know taking judgment out of the whole thing.
That's right. It's so important. And when I was just thinking about dancing, when you mentioned the dancing, that when I first met my second husband who died, about a week after we went on our first date, it was my high school reunion. And I really wanted to go. And I thought, I'll just see if he'll go with me.
Mhm.
And he did. He was game, and we went. And I had no idea whether he could dance. I didn't think of myself as a particularly good dancer, but they were playing really cool music, and I really wanted to dance. And so I asked him to dance, and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay." And I thought, what's he talking about? And it was an upbeat, really great dance song that we got up to. And we literally cleared the floor. He was the best dancer I ever saw.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea that that was going to happen. And I was just kind of, and he just wowed everybody. And they all applauded at the end. And he was so tired afterwards. He didn't do the other dances. He did one slow dance because I really wanted to do a slow dance. But that was all the dancing we did that night. But boy, it opened up my life to a kind of joy that I hadn't experienced before with dancing. The joy that I could see with him loving that so much. And I could go on. The rest of the time we were together, we made points of going to places where we could dance too. He didn't put on quite the show that he put on that night, but he said when he was in high school, which was many years before at that point,
Yeah.
he felt that he wasn't that attractive. Now, I thought he was gorgeous, but he thought he wasn't that attractive. So he taught himself to be the best dancer on the floor so that girls would dance with him. And and he was the best dancer on the floor. He was just absolutely amazing. And I had no idea I was going to see that. So I can't help but smile and have this great memory when I think about dancing and about watching him dance and him dancing with me. And I can remember one time in Maui after we moved here, and he wasn't doing much dancing at all, but we would go to listen to friends of ours that were musicians on Sunday nights at this wonderful place where we could watch the sunset and dance. And it was just
Magic.
their music. Yeah, it was magic. And one night he decided he wanted to dance, and it wasn't nearly what that performance was at my reunion, but it was good. And at the end, one of my friends walked up to me and she said, "He's got some moves." I never forgot that comment because I thought that was so neat. So whenever I think about that kind of dancing, I can't help but smile and remember the joy we both felt for different reasons related to dancing.
Well, I think that's another thing that when someone passes, there is great sadness because they're no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
But they have given us joy in so many different ways that's the healing process. And it's it's not just someone leaving your life that you often have grief over. Sometimes it's the death of a dream, or the death of a career, or the death of a project that just is not going to happen, and no matter how much you've put into it. So that the grief of loss can come in many different aspects. Somebody may not have died in your life, but a dream may have died, and you do suffer a loss at that time too. And your book gives people so many different ways. I mean, journaling for sure. I mean, like I've said, I recommend journaling to just about anybody that I counsel, or that I have contact with, because it does help you to understand what's going on inside of yourself, and it gives you a better perspective. And very often it can answer questions for you that you didn't know you had. And, again, there's no negative way of journaling. The only negative I can think of is I have bought a lot of beautiful journals that I don't want to write in yet because I'm not sure I'm ready to. But the black and white notebook from school, I'll scribble in that every day.
I've got a bookshelf full of those black and white notebooks.
Yeah.
I write most of them, but recently I started getting out those journals that I've mostly gotten as gifts and using them, and I find it feels special when I write them. And I'm really glad I started doing that. So it depends on what I'm writing, on which journal I'll pick up to write in. But use those pretty journals too. It feels good.
It's sort of like, maybe I do have something of worth, and don't be afraid to put a good recipe in it if you run across one.
I
And
do.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
most people say, well, but this is my so and so journal. And no, put the recipe down, because if you lose it, you've lost it.
Mhm.
And I think that it's okay. You keep saying in so many different places, it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to do what you want. It's okay to tailor something to your own needs or your own desires, because that's what walking out of this process is getting to know yourself better. And what better way than letting yourself guide yourself?
Yes.
And your workshops, your questions at the end of each chapter are just so impressive, and they're so exciting. And if you've never written, it's really easy to, because you start them all out with, today I do this, or tomorrow I do this, or it's you make your list. And if you don't follow it, then the next day you amend your list.
Mhm.
And that's okay too, because there are no rules. And that's one of the other aspects of all of this that is really amazing. You talk also about a vision board,
Mhm.
which is very exciting. You want to talk to people a little bit about vision boarding?
Oh, I love vision boarding. I actually have one in my office here that uh, people don't all necessarily come to my office very often, but a gentleman came in the other day that hadn't been in there before, and he saw it and he goes, "That's your vision board." That's so cool. I love what you put on it, and and I thought that was neat that he recognized that. But I've done different vision boards throughout my life at different times in my life when I was trying to see what I was going to do at that point.
Hmm.
And I would get together pictures. I used to always get them out of usually magazines, but since the internet is so easy to find
Oh
things,
yeah.
I'll find pictures there that I can print off and cut them out, and I just get a pile of things that I would like to have on my vision board. And it was one of the first things I noticed about my husband Ron when I went to his home for the first time, is there was this vision board, and I thought, I can see that he's living his vision, and that made a powerful impact on me. And I put things on there on my most recent one that I have pictures of people who make a big difference for me in my life. For instance, I early in grief with what turned my grief around really with my first husband, who I said it was a different situation. I just truly didn't know what to do. And somebody told me I had to watch the movie The Secret, that would help me. And I didn't really know what it was about or anything, but
Hmm.
watched it, and the things that it had in it did help me. And I thought of different things there, and there were certain people in the movie that made an impression on me. Well, interestingly, in the book, or in my grieving and in this current vision board that I have, that I've had up there for maybe 8 years now. I had pictures on there of people. One of them is Marcy Shimoff. And
Mm-hmm.
I put her up there because after Jacques died, I read her book, Happy for No Reason. And I read it because I saw the title and I thought, I have no reason to be happy right now because my husband died. And I want to see what she has to say about that. And I didn't recall at that time that I had seen her in the movie The Secret. So I went back and revisited The Secret. And I ultimately, that's where the happiness part of my grief and happiness things came from. That's
Mm-hmm.
podcast came from, and everything was this relationship I developed with Marcy over the years. And I became a certified Happy for No Reason trainer. But as I was I was cutting pictures out of people that I had seen for the first time that I could remember in the Secret. And three of these people were Marcy Shimoff, Michael Beckwith, and Jack Canfield. Well, since that time, Marcy has become a friend of mine. She comes to Maui often, and she called me and said, "Hey, you want to go meditate with me today?" And yeah, sure, can do that. And she's influenced my life so much on happiness. That's helped me influence so many people with happiness because of that connection from my vision board. Jack Canfield interviewed me. I've got on my website, I have a copy of the interview that he did with me about my first book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. And it was magical talking to him. It was just a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm.
The other person, Michael Beckwith from Agape International Spiritual Center, grew up with my husband, Ron.
Oh, wow.
And he actually did the celebration of his life that we had in California, because we did one thing in Maui and then we did one thing in California because he knew so many people there. They grew up together, and he did that service for him. So you never know when you put something on your vision board how it's going to turn out. Don't judge it at the time you put on. If something speaks to you, is something that you would like to have or would make your life different in a way that you know that you would really enjoy, or could serve you or serve other people in a way you want to, put it on your vision board, cut it out, get a piece of anything to
Yeah.
one of the first ones I had, I used a piece of acoustical tile like they put on the ceilings and stretched some fabric over it, and then I could just push pins into it and change it out whenever I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I graduated to magazines, and now I can cut things out of pictures I print off of online, and all of them work. So whatever
Oh, sure.
works for you.
Now, I did a workshop with a group of people and doing vision boards, and a year afterwards, we all got together with our vision boards to see, just how it's having a vision board and having it by your computer or wherever, not in your closet. And one of the girls kept it in her closet and said nothing's happened, and it was like,
A funny thing.
yeah, well, funny thing, you're supposed to be reminding yourself, but and another one of the girls plunked hers out and said, everything on my vision board came true.
Mhm.
And, we thought, oh, that's really cool. You must have really looked a lot at it. She said, I did. I looked a lot at it. I worked hard. I worked hard at work, but I kept seeing my vision where she used it as her screensaver on her computer.
Oh, cool.
And she said, the only thing not on my vision board was a better job. And, and we looked at her and she said, I got fired. And she said, on my next vision board, there is going to be a job. So that knowing how well this works, I want to make sure that a job is there and I have a job. And we kind of looked at her and I said, she kept saying, I lost my job. I lost my job. And I said, congratulations. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, obviously you're ready for something else or it wouldn't have happened. And she said, well, I never thought of that. And I said, well, now look what the universe has to offer you. Yeah,
Yes.
it's so maybe that this is a wonderful thing. And they all wanted to do another. And now on a yearly basis, the group gets together and does vision boards, and then takes a look and sees, what has really actually happened. And, sometimes vision boards take more than a year. It isn't automatic, but you can see change, and you can see the fact that you are reminding yourself of all these things you want to bring into your life. And it works,
Yeah.
but you also have to work with it. It's not a matter of, here's my dream, winning $1 million. Okay, but maybe you're going to get $1 million worth of something else that isn't money. So just make sure how broad you're going to let it go. But that to me was a wonderful experience, in that it does work. That you have to work for yourself. You can't just put something out there and sit back and wait. I tell people, if you're going to sit on a silver platter, you're just going to get tarnish on your rear end.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
you know, it doesn't work that way. You do have to work for it. But the other thing that was so important here, that I pulled out of your book, was that, you know, helping other people, not necessarily, counseling them or anything like that. The thing I have the most fun with is in the grocery store, looking for people who are alone and saying something nice to them, and then just moving on. You can feel the energy and the warmth of something nice you did for somebody else that took no effort.
Mhm.
And these random acts of kindness, to me, it's a good way to start putting your energy out there. Even if you're sad, even if you're unhappy, you're going to see other people who are worse off than you, for sure. And just say how pretty a color looks on somebody, or how magical they look, or any number of things. And I usually try women, because I don't want men thinking I'm trying to pick them up. But I saw a man trying on a hat in the store the other day, and I said to him, "Oh, that one works well for you. You definitely should get it." And he said, "I don't know. It's a lot of money." I said, "I can almost promise you you'll get a lot of action if you do that." And he bought the hat. Um,
I
I'm
love
old enough so I can say things like that to younger men these days. But it's so easy to share joy, and you have an unlimited amount of it. And the more you use it, the more you have. And it's not like I only have a cup and a half of it today. Um, Trust me, if you give the cup and a half away, you're going to find lots more in there to play with, and have a great story to tell on an interview.
Mhm.
So helping other people in unique and different ways, that it doesn't, I think what I love so much about everything you've got here is that it doesn't cost any money.
Mhm.
It just takes time. And that's what grieving is. It's
Mhm.
time. And you learn so much from it. You grow so much from it. I know, on my husband's deathbed, literally, um, I have often said that I don't counsel people. My philosophy, for me, it's only for me, is that I don't try to counsel people on something I haven't experienced. Because as a teacher, and I am a teacher by profession, um, I have found that a teacher has no right to try to teach something if they haven't experienced it themselves. That's just for me. And on his deathbed, he was, we were chatting briefly in and out, and he said, "Well, you can finally talk to people who have lost their husbands or wives." And I looked at him and said, "I appreciate your effort at helping me out, but this is one thing that I don't think I really would have voluntarily signed up for." And he said, "Well, I'm dying, so you must have." And I said, "No, that's not fair. You signed up for this too." And he said, "You're right." but but and it's true. And within a week of his passing, I had 3 women call me whose husbands had just died, and I counseled them. And somebody was at my home said, "Well, that's not fair. You shouldn't have to go through that." And I said, "This is how I heal. If I don't counsel them, I'm a hypocrite. And I'm not about to admit to being a hypocrite." So here we go. But all of these things you've got here are so amazing. And even if you're not going through grief, going through your book and going through these steps helps to make you a better person.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's a great title, and it is to a certain topic, but the reality is all of these ways are ways to shift and change your life to move into a more spiritual aspect of life. Not create a fanatic, but just to give you a new level, a new understanding of how spirit moves through you for your life, and how you can touch other people with the joy that you find within yourself, because your book is a way of finding joy. I mean, happiness and grief, I think I would have said joy, because joy is to me deeper a deeper aspect of happiness. But that's just my concept. But you even go through inventing yourself, reinventing yourself, and I do believe that at least every 10 years we have to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, we're constantly evolving, constantly.
Well, most people don't really realize that. They think, I'm X number of years old, therefore this is me. But Grandma Moses didn't start painting until she was in her 80s. And if that had been her concept, we never would have been gifted with her artwork.
That's right.
So it's a matter of understanding that we are always growing, we are expanding. The one thing you have here too is putting your affairs in order, which is a good idea. And in our 20s and 30s, it's something we wouldn't even consider. The older we get, the smarter we get, and it's a very good idea. Um, I have a notebook that has my son's name on it, and it's only to be opened in the event of my death. And it's all in there with what I want and how I want it and things like that. Um, I lately have been seriously considering performing my own funeral ceremony
Oh, wow.
on videotape, kind of like, "Hi, if you see me, I guess I'm dead. This is what I want."
I love that.
But it's kind of like you get to a point where you become more comfortable with the aspect of the fact that everybody does eventually cross, but it's not an ending, it's a beginning. So yes, I won't be in places to experience things, and yes, it's a sad that there's a sadness, a momentary sadness. um, I know that I'm a psychic medium, among other things, and I went to my granddaughter's. I guess it was a long time ago. So she had to be like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, and it was a piano recital. And it was done in a church, and at 8 or 9, trust me, she wasn't great, but she was sitting there in a dress that I had brought from her, that my grandmother made for me when I was 8.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought it was so cool. And we were sitting there, and my son looked at me, and I had tears running down my face, and he said, "She's not that good, Mom." And I said, "No, but I actually saw my mother and grandmother standing by the piano."
Oh,
And it was, to me, the most touching thing I had ever seen. And she wasn't great, but it was a memory that I will hold forever, because not only was she wearing the dress that I had when I was 8, but the there was lace on the collar, and that was made by my great great grandmother.
oh,
So
wow.
it brought in the spirits, and it was just a magical thing. So I forget where I'm going with this, but but it's kind of like understanding that this is a wonderful process, and it's not one that you invite in, but when it's there, you take advantage of it,
Yeah.
and you can wallow in it or you can grow from it. I loved also the part about moving on through your closet.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
I don't have it in me to do that one yet, but it's you outline so many different ways that we can reinvent ourselves. That we can say, okay, this is me all by myself, and it's a joyful experience, and um, I think that you've done here such a beautiful job of learning how to serve yourself through serving others.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. That was the point for sure.
Well, you made it for sure. Um, I need you to also you I want to learn a little bit more about the deck of cards that you did, because um, are they meant to be? Well, tell us about what they are, and then how people use them.
Well, as I mentioned, there's 52 of them,
Hmm.
and they can be used in a variety of ways. Uh, I used them before they were published as something that helped me through my grief with writing what I put on them and with taking the pictures that I put on them, because there's 52 different pictures as well as 52 different things written on the cards. And I took those pictures when I was going on walks here in Maui. And being out in nature brings me great joy. And there's so much beauty here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I had over 1,000 pictures to choose from to make it go down to 52. And so they're quite lovely. And I'm sure there are pictures of things in there that you haven't seen before, as well as things that you may really love. And I really loved going through all those pictures to find things to put on the cards. Now, each card has on it um, a title, what the card's about. So if you wanted to, you could shuffle through the cards and find a title like this one that I just picked up says an invitation.
Uh-huh.
And what it says is having someone to talk to or seeing other people can be refreshing. Put yourself out there. Invite someone out for coffee or lunch. If the first person declines, keep asking. Then enjoy yourself and talk about whatever you want and be happy. Now that could apply to anyone or
Sure.
any situation. And I've had people um, pull one out a week is was the initial intention, and read that and have that be kind of their intention for that week. I've had people pull one out whenever they felt like they needed some support, and they would
Hmm.
pull one of them out at random, or they could look through and see the titles. Or some people have done readings for other people with them,
Hmm.
and they'll pull one out and or have the person pull one out, and they'll read them the card and then interpret for them what they think that means to that person. Or I've had people use them for journaling prompts.
Oh
There's
yeah.
different ways that you can use these cards. And one thing, one friend of mine reminded me just today that he had purchased 38 boxes of cards so far because at his age, so many people had died and they're great bereavement gifts.
Oh wow.
So, and I appreciated that very much. But they are good bereavement gifts because unlike flowers that fade away quickly, these can last them forever. So there's lots and lots of ways that you can enjoy these beautiful cards, and they're also very sturdy. So they're not like playing cards weight.
Hmm.
They're solid. So they'll last
Substantial.
forever. Substantial. That's a good word. They'll last you for as long as you want them to, or when you want to pass them on to somebody else.
Well, I think that's a tool like that is important, especially for people who are not writers who need
Or
to have
like
have um, an entrance, an entree, a portal to go through to
Mhm.
begin writing, and that's an amazing gift. I know that you make you give someone with your book the opportunity to not only move through a growth aspect of their life, but you give them the opportunity to discover more about themselves than they ever knew before.
That's right.
And the one thing that I tell people is that the only thing I know of that is the same in every language is a smile.
Mhm.
And it speaks volumes. Even if the language isn't there, the intent is there. And so it's kind of like I know I've had people say, well, I can't smile anymore. And you can. It's a muscle. Work it. It happens. And actually, my son, I wanted an iWatch, and I had an iPhone, and I finally got the iWatch, and I have on it, you can have all different faces and everything. There's an app for it that's Snoopy in lots of different positions and different whatevers. And my son said, "You're 80 years old, Mom. Snoopy on the watch." And I said to him, "Okay, look at this." And I showed him my watch face, and he smiled.
Yeah.
And and
Oh,
I said, every time I look to see what time it is, I have to smile because Snoopy's doing something stupid. And the other day I noticed, now this is a big time lawyer, and now he's in his 50s. And I noticed the other day he had Snoopy on his watch.
oh,
And
cool.
and it's nothing that was said or done that makes you, it's just you smile. And if you smile, then if you can smile, you can survive.
That's right.
And I think that's where some people think, especially with loss of a loved one, that they're never going to get better and they're never going to move on. And the reality is, yeah, in your book, holy mackerel, it it helps people to move on and not forget, but remember with joy and smiles. And it's kind of like it gets to a point where, tell me something funny about, so and so who passed away. And everybody always finds a story that's funny. Everybody can always find something that will make them laugh. And it's a start. As soon as you're smiling, as soon as you're laughing, you've broken through. Then it's a matter of, um, where do we go from here? So tell people about the closet, though. I love the closet story.
Oh, remind me.
How you reinvent yourself through your closet.
Oh, yeah. It it's amazing. Um, with I remember thinking that at a certain age I had to wear certain clothes like my mother did.
Hmm.
And you got my mother, it felt like she'd made it when she started being able to get her hair done at the beauty salon once a week
Oh
and leave
my,
it in that same style and not wash it all week.
yeah.
That just sounds like torture to me. But as even as an adult, I thought that was what I was supposed to do when I got to a certain spot.
Hmm.
And so I realized with the clothing that I wear, it it says so much about me. If I see people smile at me when I've got something on that I feel particularly comfortable in, it's not like that I'm trying to look pretty or sexy or anything, but the comfort comes through with
Absolutely.
what I'm portraying by the way that I'm dressing. And so the process of going through my closet was really revealing to me with the things that I could release because I wasn't that person anymore. And the things that I realized I wanted to add to it because I was a different person.
Hmm.
And I can tell you now, most of my clothes look, not today so much, but usually look very Hawaiian. I've
Hmm.
embraced the culture. And the more you you can portray who you want to be by how you dress, and being able to do that. And I made sure that I found the right homes for the things that I gave away. I didn't just throw them in a bag and give them to one of the places that I know sells them for rags. That wasn't what I wanted to do. I found people who would really appreciate and could really use what I have or had, and that I gave up. And I did that after Jacques died. So when Ron died, he had so many people here that had come over because we knew it was imminent. And so they came over from the mainland and came to visit us here for the last week. And they stayed a couple of days afterwards too. And I invited all the men that were there. I went in and took out the things that were very special to me. And there weren't very many, but there were things that meant a lot, like what he wore for our wedding. And a special shirt that I got him that was created by Nelson Mandela's shirt designer. And Nelson Mandela was so known for his shirts that he really treasured that shirt. And so I wanted to keep that one. But I invited them to go into the closet and choose what they wanted to and take it with them in his memory. And they were all so touched. And they just... They all of them went home with things that they were so thrilled that they had. And there was one coat that I couldn't give up. It was this gorgeous, like full-length leather coat that it's a classic, gorgeous, classy coat that he had. And I know nobody in Maui was probably going to wear that, but people might have taken it to the mainland, but I couldn't let it go. Well, recently I said, I don't know why I'm hanging on to that. And there's a man here who, interestingly, worked at a store that we would happen to run into him every time we'd come over here on vacation before we moved here. And they would have a conversation. It was like every time we were here, he would bump into this guy. But once we moved here, he didn't really get a chance to know him, and he wanted to. Even though I could go shopping for the afternoon while these two guys would stand there and talk. And so he came over because he was doing something for me, and I took that coat out to him, and I said, "Would you like to have this?" And he said, "That was Ron's." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I would love to have that." And it was so special. So I think my message is, don't stay stuck. Find what you don't need to hang on to. Find what can serve other people. And this doesn't have to be just clothes in your closet.
Yeah, true.
Find what is it that other people could benefit greatly from, that you could gift them with. And pick out the things for you that represent who you are now. You don't need, I can't tell you how many closets that I could fill up in a house that I had before. And now I have a closet, and all my stuff fits in that closet, and it's not a particularly big closet, and it's comfortable, and it feels good, and it doesn't weigh me down with possessions that I don't need.
Yeah, I've been known to hang on to a dress that it just, there's, for some reason, it was special, and over time it's not only not in style but wouldn't fit me anymore. And I finally took a look at it, and all I could think of is, somebody will enjoy this, and it's now become kind of it scoffs at me because I can't get into it anymore. And it's like, go find another person to give joy to. I did take a walk into my closet, and I looked around, and I thought, I'm going to have to go through here. I'm going to have to move on things that other people can utilize. When my last husband passed away, I took all of his clothes to the veterans because he was a veteran, and it's stuff that other people can use, that need.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a, I have a shirt that was his, that he was interviewed for, oh gosh, Ancient Aliens and a couple of other things. So it means a lot to me. And it reminds me of a time that was quite joyful. He was an ordained minister, though he never served in a church, and he didn't really like church, and he didn't want to go to church. And when he was on Ancient Aliens, he was filmed in a church, which I thought was hysterical. And I made him get up in the pulpit so I could have a picture of him in the pulpit. And it was 2 weeks before he passed away.
Oh, wow.
But it was kind of like, okay, so that shirt meant something to me, but the rest of the stuff, not so much. Other people needed it, and some of my clothes that need to go, they don't need to go to anybody. They just need to find a rag bin or something. But it's kind of like they're reminders. But it's taking a journey through your closet is often a good idea. Somebody said if you haven't worn it in 5 years, chances are you're not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but and I think I have some of my mother and grandmother's depression type mentality. You never know, the stores may never close, and never open again, and you may have to use this. But I am passing through that phase into, it can give somebody else joy. What am I doing?
That's right.
And I haven't quite taken the journey with the trash bags, give and share, and yet, but I have the trash bags, so
Oh,
I'm halfway there. I'm halfway there.
that's good. One
Um,
of the things too is don't get attached to where the things are going. You don't have to worry about that. Once you release them,
yeah.
they're released. I heard a wonderful story about that once. I was taking a quilting class after Jacques died, for something to keep me occupied. And these two women in the class were sitting there talking, and one of them said, I made this most gorgeous quilt in the world that I gave to my son for him and his family, and it spent all this money, and on and on about how beautiful it was and how long it took her to do it. And she said, you wouldn't believe what he did with it. We went to a picnic this weekend, and they put it on the grass and sat on it on the grass. And she was so upset. And the person she was talking to looked at her and said, you need to go home tonight and look up in the dictionary the definition of the word gift.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me ever since then. It's none of my business what happens to those things. And sometimes it can be magical. Another story for me, I was very involved in theater. And one of the things I got to do was the costumes for a TV show that the Cronkite Ward, Walter Cronkite's company's broadcasting system put on, that was about the writing of the Grapes of Wrath. And at the time, I was living where the people from the Grapes of Wrath ended up in California. And I was able to, let me see, how long ago was that? Probably 30 years ago. Maybe more than that. I was able to actually go into thrift stores and find the clothes that people wore at that time.
Oh my.
And the shoes. And it was all, I costumed the whole thing. There was nothing new in it. All of it was from that time, because somebody paid it forward with their gifts of those vintage clothing. And it made that production so special. They were just shocked that I was able to do that, because they assumed that I'd be having to make things to make them look like that and distress them and everything to make them look like that. But I didn't have to, because people were generous with things that they really didn't have a use for, but that I have a use for it, that entertains so many people.
I would think too, the clothing had the energy of the time too.
Yes, it did. Absolutely.
And helped to give the person the feeling of the time in order to make it a more real performance. I need you also to you have founded the Grief and Happiness Alliance nonprofit organization. What steered you in that direction, and what does the organization do?
Well, I discovered that after my husband Jacques was a philosophy professor, but he also worked a great deal in the ethics of living and dying and grief and bereavement, and he taught a class that all the nursing students at the college where he taught had to take to teach them about how to grieve. And when he first got into that, he did a sabbatical in England where he got to study with Dame Cicely Saunders, who was actually at the forefront of hospice. And he worked very closely with her, like second in command person, who I even got to know. It was very special. And because at that time, it was back in the 70s, as I said, he's a lot older than I am. And in the 70s, there was no hospice in the community where we lived. It was kind of a new concept. Mm-hmm. And he came back from England and worked to get a hospice into that community. And before that happened, there were no bereavement groups or grief groups or any place for people to go and talk about grief. So he and a marriage, family, child counselor that he knew got together and formed the Bereaved Persons Association. And every month they'd meet and invite anybody who wanted to come to this group to talk about their grief and work it out. He would come home from those meetings each time and tell me some of the things that people talked about. And he'd just be in tears. And he'd say, I said, every time you come home from this, everybody, you're worn out. And it sounds like everybody cries there. And so that was my perception of a grief group.
Yeah.
And I felt like I wanted to meet somebody to talk to. And here in Maui, I didn't know people. And so I didn't want to go to like a hospice group, because my perception was I'd go in there and everybody would be crying. And I said, I don't need to cry about somebody else's grief right now.
Got my own.
But pull myself together here. So somebody invited me to Death Cafe. And I went to that, and it was a really good experience because it was positive. They actually held it in a Mexican restaurant in Hawaii, of all things, where we sit outside and they'd drink beer and eat nachos and talk about their experiences. People of all ages would be there, and it was upbeat and nice. And I thought that's what I'd like. Well, unfortunately, the group ultimately kind of faded away, so it wasn't here anymore. And I thought, what could I do? And that was after I'd started in the process of starting my Grief and Happiness podcast. And I was really wanting to focus on happiness and figure out a way to tie grief and happiness together, but I wasn't sure people were going to buy it. So I thought about people throughout my lifetime that I still was in touch with in one way or another, and invited them all to come to like pilot session of what I thought a grief group would be cool to be like, and get their comments on it and see what we could do. And so they came together and we did a grief and happiness session. And what we did was write, because writing is my strength. So I gave them a topic they could write about on grief. And then we talked about it together afterwards. And then after that, I taught them a happiness practice. And we got together after we did all that. And I said, well, what'd you think? And they said, it's fabulous. Nobody's doing anything like this. We need to show people that they can be happy even though they're grieving.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm game. I'll do it. And I do it on Zoom, so everybody, any place can come. I said, my only problem or concern with this is that it costs money to do things like that. And I don't want to charge people to give them this kind of gift.
Yeah.
And they agreed with me. And they said, do it anyway, and we'll form a nonprofit and support that so that you can give this gift to the people without them having to pay. And so once a week, every Sunday, we get together and do exact same things. I usually have an international group every Sunday. The group
Mhm.
isn't real big, so it's close enough. We go into breakout rooms so people get to actually talk to somebody else who's also grieving about the same subjects that they just both wrote, or however many people were in the group wrote about.
Yeah.
And they love it. And I would really like to grow it more and grow the nonprofit more. So I'm looking for people who are interested in coming to that, and people who are interested in participating in the nonprofit organization in ways that we can raise more funds to be able to provide more of this, more days throughout the week, and do more with it. So it's quite wonderful. The website is griefandhappiness.com, where you can learn more about it, where you can contribute to it, where you can email me and volunteer to go to that, or email me, or actually you can get the reservation link on that website so that you can
Okay.
go to the meetings, and everybody's welcome.
Fabulous. There are, my sister has been in a number of grief groups, and usually everybody's crying, and I said to her, you're into doing groups, and that's a good idea, but is there another group you could add in that might help you balance this out? And she's in an art group where you have to do once a week, you have to do something creative that you've never done before.
Oh, cool. I love
And, it could be inviting somebody to lunch. It could be taking a drumming class. It could be any number of things, but once a week, you have to do something you've never done before.
I love
And it has stretched her. And she said, I find great joy in that one. And she said, I'm cutting back a little bit on the grief groups because they're all unhappy. And I said, well, then maybe it's time you just moved on to a different kind of group.
Mm-hmm.
And you always have the grief group to fall back on if you have, you don't get to go back if a zipper's broken or something like that. But where the help is if you need it to that level.
That's right. That's right. And the people that come to our group, a lot of them are in more groups, and they said that this adds such a nice balance, and that they're weaning themselves away from the kind of group that they needed at that point. That served them, and that's fine. Just because it wasn't for me doesn't mean it's not for other people. But they got what they could from those groups, and now they are getting what they need from this group. And some people come once a year. Other people come every few weeks, and other people come every single week. So it's do what you need at this moment.
Yeah, and understand that happiness is part of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And happiness and joy and laughter are the portal to going to where you hope to be at some point in time. Doesn't mean that you're there today, but it means you've got the portal to go through when it's your time.
Ready.
So I want to thank you so much. It looks like our time is kind of up here, and I am so appreciative of you hanging in there with me and being understanding about how one can lose one's voice and have to move a show to a different time.
Well, actually, I lost my voice about 2 years ago, and have been dealing with that and having real problems with getting my podcasts done until we finally found out it was an issue with my thyroid. And since I've had my thyroid out, and I can talk again, so I'm happy to talk.
Well, quite possibly you needed to lose your voice for a while to find it in another way too.
That's true, and I think I did. I really do.
And the cool thing is that when you do find the answer, then you move on.
Yeah.
And the universe will challenge you in another way.
That's right.
Well, and the nonprofit is griefandhappiness.com.
That's right.
Okay, we'll make sure we send people on to there. I want to thank you so much. This has been such a great pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure's mine. I appreciate you having me here.
My delight. Take care now.
Thank you.
Okay.